Throughout history, human beings have sought meaning, direction, and security. In that pursuit, religions often promise to offer structure and hope. But beneath that promise, some of the most destructive cults and movements have risen, reshaping lives through manipulation, fear, and violence. These groups thrive on control, not liberation. They claim to reveal truth, but their real power lies in isolating people from reality, stripping away their independence and convincing them that obedience is the highest virtue. When we study the most dangerous religious cults in history, we see patterns that reflect the darker side of human psychology and the dangerous potential of unquestioned belief. The term cult often brings to mind small, eccentric groups living in isolation. But the reality is far broader. Some cults are vast movements that influenced millions, while others were tightly controlled communities that ended in horrific tragedies. What unites them is not their size, but their method. Absolute authority at the top, unquestioning loyalty demanded from the bottom, and a narrative that justifies every abuse in the name of faith. Looking at them reveals how belief can become a weapon more dangerous than any blade or gun. Take the People's Temple, led by Jim Jones. In the 1970s, Jones convinced hundreds of followers to abandon their homes and relocate to Guyana, where he established Jonestown. He presented it as a utopia free of racism and inequality, but in practice it became a prison. Members were isolated from family and the outside world. Sleep deprivation, punishments, and threats kept them in line. When outsiders raised questions, Jones painted them as enemies. The cult culminated in 1978 with the mass poisoning that killed more than 900 people, including children. This was not just mass suicide, it was mass murder disguised as loyalty. The terrifying part is how many intelligent, compassionate people followed him willingly, convinced that faith in him was the only path. That same pattern of manipulation surfaces in many other groups. In Japan, Aum Shinrikyo combined Buddhist and Hindu ideas with apocalyptic prophecy. Its leader, Shoko Asahara, built a narrative of global catastrophe and framed himself as the only savior. His followers included scientists, engineers, and highly educated individuals. They produced chemical weapons and in 1995 released sarin gas in the Tokyo subway, killing 12 people and injuring thousands. This wasn't an obscure fringe community hidden in the forest. It was a modern, organized cult operating in one of the world's most advanced societies. And it demonstrates how dangerous religious conviction can be when it places unquestionable authority above human life. The Branch Davidians in Waco, Texas, followed a similar trajectory of devotion turning into destruction. Their leader, David Koresh, claimed prophetic insight and demanded total loyalty. When federal authorities attempted to investigate weapons, stockpiling, and child abuse, it turned into a standoff that lasted 51 days. In the end, fire consumed the compound, killing more than 70 men, women, and children. The government's handling was controversial, but the deeper question remains. How does a single man gain the power to command others to risk death in his name? The answer lies in religion's ability to bypass rational doubt and speak directly to fear, guilt, and hope. If we go back further in history, the pattern is still visible. The Children of God, later renamed the Family International, emerged in the late 1960s. They used the language of love and peace, but institutionalized exploitation. Members were told that sexual activity, even with children, was divinely ordained. Under the guise of spiritual freedom, abuse was normalized. Survivors still struggle today with the trauma of being raised in a system that sanctified exploitation. This is perhaps one of the clearest examples of how religious cults twist morality. Acts that would be condemned in any other context are rebranded as holy, leaving victims with confusion that lasts a lifetime. What all these examples show is that cults do not require the irrational or uneducated to thrive. They often attract people seeking community, purpose, or a sense of justice. Intelligent individuals join because the group offers answers to deep human needs. But once inside, critical thinking is systematically dismantled. Followers are told to distrust outsiders, to suppress doubts, and to measure their worth through obedience. This mechanism is not unique to small groups. It reflects a structure inherent in organized religion itself. The difference is only in scale and visibility. The The destructive power of these cults lies not only in the tragedies they caused, but also in the insight they give into human vulnerability. People join because they crave certainty in an uncertain world. Leaders exploit that by offering simple answers to complex questions. In exchange, they demand loyalty, money, or even lives. And once a person internalizes that bargain, escape becomes almost impossible. Families are torn apart, children raised in environments where abuse is normalized, and communities isolated from reality. The damage ripples outward far beyond the group itself. Some may argue that these cults are exceptions, outliers that don't represent religion as a whole. But the line is thinner than many realize. When obedience to authority is seen as virtue, when questioning is labeled as sin, and when leaders claim divine status, the groundwork for abuse is already laid. Cults simply magnify what is often present in softer forms in larger traditions. They show us where blind faith can lead when taken to its logical extreme. One of the most chilling aspects of religious cults is how they manipulate the most fundamental human bonds. Groups like Heaven's Gate illustrate this perfectly. Led by Marshall Applewhite, members were taught that Earth was doomed, and salvation lay in abandoning their bodies to ascend to a higher plane aboard an alien spacecraft. It sounds absurd from the outside, but the tragedy is that dozens of people followed him to their deaths in 1997. These weren't individuals seeking self-destruction. They were looking for transcendence, meaning, and belonging. The cult provided it, at the cost of their lives. This case reveals how a powerful narrative can override the survival instinct itself when framed as part of a cosmic plan. But Heaven's Gate was far from unique. Throughout history, countless groups have thrived on the promise of escape from a broken world. The Millerite movement in the 1840s, though not always called a cult, operated in a similar manner. Followers of preacher William Miller believed the end of the world would come in 1844. When the date passed uneventfully, it became known as the Great Disappointment. Many abandoned the movement, but others reinterpreted the failure as part of a hidden plan. Out of that reinterpretation, the Seventh-day Adventist Church emerged. This highlights another dimension. Failed prophecies rarely end cults. Instead, they are rebranded, reframed, and turned into new movements. Believers are told their doubt is weakness, and the cycle continues. This pattern can be seen repeatedly. Prophecy, disappointment, reinterpretation, and survival. The Jehovah's Witnesses made several predictions about the world's end, all of which failed. Yet the movement grew and solidified. What begins as a fringe prophecy can, through persistence and adaptation, become a global religion. In this sense, the difference between a cult and an established religion is often just a matter of time and success. Both operate on the same psychological mechanisms: trust in authority, the dismissal of doubt, and the willingness to sacrifice autonomy for certainty. Some cults go further than false promises. They engage in outright terror. Consider the case of the Thuggee cult in India, active for centuries. Under the guise of religious devotion to the goddess Kali, members roamed the land as professional killers, strangling unsuspecting travelers as ritual offerings. Estimates suggest they may have murdered tens of thousands before British colonial authorities suppressed them in the 19th century. Unlike many modern cults that prey on their own members, the Thuggees directed their violence outward, but the same dynamic of sanctifying cruelty was present. Killing wasn't seen as crime, it was devotion. This demonstrates how religion can be weaponized not only against followers, but against entire societies. Another example comes from the Assassins, a sect that emerged in the Middle East during the medieval period. Devotees were indoctrinated to believe that death in service to their leader was glorious. They carried out political murders with precision, and their reputation alone spread fear across regions. They were not large in number, but their psychological impact was immense. The key point here is that indoctrination gave ordinary individuals the courage to commit acts they would otherwise recoil from. Religion acted as a shield against moral hesitation. If we step into the modern era, new religious movements continue to show how dangerous concentrated belief can be. In Uganda, the movement for the restoration of the Ten Commandments of God led thousands of followers to a horrific end in the year 2000. Leaders preach strict adherence to the Ten Commandments while building a culture of control. When predictions of apocalypse failed, dissent grew. To maintain authority, leaders orchestrated a mass killing, locking followers in a building that was then set ablaze, killing more than 700. Survivors testified that questioning the leadership was framed as rebellion against God, leaving members trapped between fear of eternal damnation and the physical violence of the group. Cults don't always require isolation or rural compounds. Some thrive in plain sight, blending with mainstream society. The Church of Scientology, though more powerful and organized than smaller groups, displays many of the same traits: authoritarian leadership, suppression of dissent, financial exploitation, and psychological control. Former members report harassment, intimidation, and disconnection from loved ones as routine practices. While it has not ended in a single mass tragedy like Jonestown, its long-term effects on families and individuals are undeniable. It shows that cult-like dynamics can exist even within groups that are legally recognized and publicly visible. The key is not whether a group calls itself a religion, a church, or a movement. It's whether it demands uncritical loyalty, isolates people from outside influence, and elevates a leader or doctrine above human welfare. These are the warning signs that history repeatedly shows us. Every time a group claims special access to truth and insists that questioning equals betrayal, the seeds of danger are planted. What makes cults particularly insidious is how they turn noble human qualities,